Hello, welcome to Our Conspiracy. I'm Amy, and if you're watching this video, it's either because you are taking my collage workshop, or you're thinking about taking my collage workshop, or maybe you're just interested in collage in general and want to see what it's about and what I'm doing with it. So anyway, welcome. I'm going to have a sort of a brief video of my approach, or the subject is a brief overview of my approach, and also the basic materials that I'm going to be using. Collage, the way I think of it is like painting with paper and paint, that combination. And the way that I really like to think about it is when you see the pieces that I create, I hope that you don't always know, right away where the collage ends and where the painting begins. So I want it to be a real organic sort of synthesis of things. Sometimes you look at a collage, it's like screams collage, and I'm trying to do something a little bit more subtle. Anyway, there are a ton of materials and styles of collage. It's been around for a long time. And I'm not going to do something completely abstract, nor am I going to do anything too literal. In the workshop, we're sort of trying to find that sweet spot where we're making new compositions, new images using collage and paint. So, okay, let me show you a couple examples. Just switch to do. Okay, so here's a piece that I did recently, and again, I hope you can't really tell where the collage ends and the painting begins, and that's the whole idea. But I'll show you, like if you hold this right here, you can see these pieces are collaged. That and this is paint. I almost thought that was collage, but I had to feel it because I forget, in my own work, which one's paint, which one's collage and paper. Okay, this is collage. Anyway, you can see where I'm going with that. In the workshop, we're not going to do anything quite this sophisticated. This takes a long time, many, many layers, but we're working in this direction. Okay, so let me show you another one. This is a little bit of like a street scene. And this is an early piece, but this is pretty fun. And I'm going to talk about the process also. So here's one. And then here's like a study, a still life, which I think is kind of fun. So, and here's one more. And what you learn in the workshop is you basically, we're going to go over composition, good composition, which is always important. Interpreting subject matter, using shape, value, color, texture, all of those things, which are, the classic elements in art that you're just going to use in different ways. And collage particularly focuses on shapes, because you're literally cutting, tearing, or creating new shapes to put down. And also hard and soft edges, because if you cut it, you get a hard edge. If you tear it, you get a softer edge. And then you can modify and sort of hide the edge. And then it's a whole new ball of wax. So anyway, I wanted to show you what we are not going to do, just to be perfectly clear, okay? This. Now, I actually made this today. I made a bad collage is what I did, but I didn't want to use someone else's collage and say that it was bad, use it for my bad example. So I made one, but we're not going to take random elements and glue them together. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a very valid form, but that's not what I'm interested in. So we're going to be basically more painting with the collage elements. This is a little test. I'm testing my various glues up here. A lot of testing going on. So let me just show you very quickly, though. Basically, there are 3 stages in the workshop that we break it down. One is the base or the substrate, and we're going to do that with watercolor. Now, this is a pretty strong watercolor, but we can collage on top of this. Here's one that's not on good paper. It's on just Bristol paper, so it's a very weak watercolor, but that's only the first layer. And then The second layer is the collage layer, where you come in, you sort of throw down the gauntlet, you start to add pieces and you build it up. And then the third one, you sort of introduce more paint on top, white out, all this other media. And that's going to be your third layer. So that's kind of the process of the workshop. And every single step along the way is an opportunity for creativity. And I'm telling you, since I started this collage journey, I have been amazed. I always, you know, I admit, I used to think collage was for people who didn't know how to draw. But I was thinking of it in a very limited way, honestly. But collage is a very, very exciting medium, and it totally reinforces and teaches you all the things that you need to know, regardless of your end game. So even if you're not going to be a collage artist per se, collage teaches you about composition and color and texture and shape and edges and all the things that I mentioned before. So it's really a valuable thing to pursue, even if it's just studies. So that's what we're going to do. So now this is your chance to get the heck out of here if you don't want to hear about all the materials, because that's where I'm going next. And I got to tell you, with collage, oh my gosh, it just opens up a world of materials. Like there's so many different kinds of papers and paints and glues, and like you could go crazy. Oh my gosh. And if you start looking at stuff on YouTube, oh, just like endless. So anyway, and I have an entire studio of all this stuff. You know, I've got like paper I've been buying all over the place. I never knew what I was going to do with. Now I can do with it. I'm ripping stuff up and I'm pulling this and pulling it. And, you know, I've got a lot of stuff at my fingertips. But in working on designing the class, I had to think, well, what are my students going to have? They're not going to have a whole arsenal of art supplies. I need to tell them, here's what you need to get started. And then you can add on, that's fine. You can add on. But I kept it pretty simple, although you might not think so at the end of this video. But I kept it pretty simple. And I also am considering like how much space you have. Like I have big tables I can spread out and I'll got all my papers going, flying. But some people work at their kitchen table or at a little desk. And so I try to put myself in the shoes of my students, try to be considerate of their situations. So don't feel like you have to write anything down, because if you do take the class, you also get a written version of this materials list. And I break it down into the basics. Here's the required materials. Here's what you need. And then here's lots of other options that you can add, or maybe you already have these supplies and you can bring more stuff into the mix. So up to you. So don't panic. I will supply a list. All right, back to the demo. Okay, the first thing is we're going to work on a base of watercolor paper. This is fairly smooth watercolor paper, which is good. You can work on a textured paper, but because you're gluing paper on top and sometimes it's thin paper, the little bumpy in the page might make a difference. It might be something you like. I don't know. I like the smoother watercolor paper. This is 140 pounds. Your substrate or your base needs to be thicker paper to take the layers that you're going to put on it and the glue. And so this is going to be thicker. So 140-pound watercolor paper. I've also done it on Bristol paper, mixed media paper, as long as it's a fairly heavy paper. And you don't, if the lighter your paper, the less water it'll take before it starts to buckle. But again, these may be studies. You may not care if it buckles a little. It's I call it not a class, but a workshop on purpose, because a workshop means you're trying things, you're learning things and trying things. And you never know exactly what's going to happen. So having said that, with the watercolor, I'm going to keep it really simple. So you can use tube colors or you can use a pan set, no problem. But I'm only asking you to have 3 colors, believe it or not: ultramarine, yellow ochre, and burnt sienna. And you also will always have them in a pre-made kit as well. And then there are some extra things. And then also a tube of white, Chinese white or white gouache. And then with watercolor, you need all the stuff that goes with watercolor. You need a spray bottle. You need like some water vessels. Obviously, now here's like an art water vessel, but you can also, look at this. Here's my cup. I like this mug. I broke it. So now it's for paint water. And here's a little bit of a lesson. You can use your nice watercolor brushes. You're not doing any fine watercolor stuff. You don't need any small brushes, really. You can use big brushes, okay? But there's something else too. You can use, I use business cards, but you can use any kind of stiff paper, or index cards work, but they're a little bit more soft and soggy. But these are really helpful along the way in multiple instances, which I'll talk about as I go along. But sometimes I use this instead of a brush. I literally scrape the paint on the paper, and I'll show you that later. Okay, but just keep that in mind. And also, you don't need great brushes. Like, remember, this watercolor base, you're going to cover a lot of it. So you're not doing the finishing work. You're doing the big loose base. Here's your chance to get loose. So I use sometimes really cheap old brushes like this that are scratchy and not great. So also you're going to have a few tubes of acrylic paint, and I'm going to ask you to get the same 3 colors. Now this is not it, but ultramarine, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and then white. And then, of course, if you have more colors than that, that's wonderful. And you could use these thinned down for your base as well. But I think in class, we're going to use the watercolor because it's thin and acrylic is thicker, which generally goes on top of things. Okay. So that's your basic substrate base material. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about collage, the collage papers. Okay, now, obviously, the collage papers are the heart of the materials list. This is our raw material that we're going to work with. Okay, so you need to bring this to class for the first day. Okay, I can tell you some things about, how to make this, but you need to come prepared with some of this. Okay, now, this is basically white copy paper. Let's see. Oh, here we go. This is just A4. It's called A4. It's like 8.5 by 11 or close to it. This is just very cheap white copy paper. And you'll find this is really handy. So this is like printer paper, right? Just white copy paper. And then what I did was I made some just colored sheets. And this is watercolor. And this is acrylic. And you can see, I actually used the cards. I didn't use my brush, really. And part of it was I didn't feel like cleaning my brushes. And these are old cards. So I'll just lay the paint down and I'll move it like this with my card. And I just make these textures. And they're really fun because, when you rip them up, sometimes you have these wonderful shapes or things that you can do with them. Anyway, so you can make some textures with existing paint that you already have, okay? And if you get the 3 colors I recommended, you have a warm with the burnt sienna, a yellow ochre, you have a cool with ultramarine. And then if you mix burnt sienna and ultramarine, you have a neutral, which you need, I'll talk about that in a second. The second thing, after copy paper and colored copy paper, is photocopies. Now, this is really cool. So I went on Pinterest, which is one of my favorite sites to just explore. And I just started free associating, like I put in fabric and, I like that one and I click on it and it gives me more suggestions. So this is like wonderful. Actually, you're looking through a piece of cloth and there's a landscape. But when I tear this up, it's very abstract. Look at this. These colors are beautiful for using this. Here's another one. It's this actually, I think also fabric, but you can imagine, I mean, already looks like a collage, but it's the texture and the color and the dark and light and dark value that I'm looking for. This is great. Look at this, all scratchy. But you can just look, you can look up distressed furniture. You know, the sky's the limit. Just start looking for surfaces that are intriguing. And you're going to cut these up and rip these up. Now look at this. I love this. This is jeans. This is folded blue jeans, believe it or not. And, you know, out of context, you just end up with this like incredible shape and color. Okay, and look at this. This is a fence post, which actually I can show you where I used it, which I think is kind of cool. Here's this look. That's my fence post that I cut out of this one. So you can use, if you start to look around for things to photocopy, you can think of, you know, wire fences or, you know, burlap sacks or anything that you think has a cool texture or a repeating rhythm or pattern. And then again, taken out of context, you don't know what it is. And here's sewing. This is a great thing, right? For collage. It's just cool sewing. And this is rice patties from above. But again, if you don't see the palm trees or you don't, you know, it's just color and pattern. So you just need a bunch of this. And this is an old door with rocks, but again, isolate this, and you get something completely different. Okay, so photocopies are a great fun thing to look for, to find texture to work with, okay? And then we have wrapping paper. You know, I don't particularly like this because it looks so craftsy, for lack of a better word. You know, whatever. But this kind of wrapping paper or tissue paper is really fun. And it really does collage very well. So you might have some of this around the house. Okay, and then I have this tissue paper that is available here in Thailand, and it comes in every different color, and it's super, super cheap. And it's thin, and it just kind of melts into your collage. So if you can get some of this, that would be really fun. You can, it's so thin that you can literally fold it, you know, and collage it in the like folded form. So it's really fun to play with, okay? This is if you have drawings, if you're already working, if drawings, you can use your drawings. I mean, check this out. If I take this out, again, take it out of context, I could put that on in something. Look at that. That's a totally cool piece of collage opportunity. Anyway, so you might even do some drawings and erase and scratch, and it's all fodder. Nothing gets wasted, which is so much fun. Here's another little thumbnail sketch that I could cut up or dissect. Okay, here's on a little piece of brown paper. This would be fun to collage. Okay, last but not least, I wanted to say you can use magazines, but remember the collage that I showed you that we're not going to do. So I want to make sure that we're on the same page. So this is from a magazine. You're not allowed to use her unless you cut out some unrecognizable part of her. But maybe this you could use. So if you want to use magazines, that's fine, but no pre-existing images. Okay, I don't want to juxtapose whales and bicycles or anything like that. We're just looking for color and texture and maybe shape and pattern. Okay, are we clear? Okay, so that's all the collage. And oh, and I wanted to say, you want to have warm colors, some warm colors, even just 3 different pages, 3 different warm colors, 3 different cool colors, some cool colors, and neutrals. So grays and, warm grays, cool grays, and what I call dirty white. So things that are light, but not just plain stark white. And I've been saving these little boxes, and I keep my papers in here. And I have a box for cools and a box for warms and box for neutrals. You probably don't have room for these big boxes, but you might want some envelopes or something to organize, because your colors are like your palette, right? Like you're a painter. Okay, hold on. So then the next category is your cutting instruments or whatever. So I have a little cutting mat here, and if you don't have one, that's fine, but you need something to cut on, I assume. Especially if you're going to use something like this, like an X-Acto knife to cut a specific shape. Now, since I started collaging, I use this a lot less, I find. I don't use it very often. I either use the scissors to cut a crisp shape, or I use, and I'll show you, I use my ruler to do a quick line. It's a softer edge than a cut edge. Okay, but it's still pretty straight, or you can obviously rip. Okay, so those are the three things. You either cut or you tear, I guess you call that, or rip. And an X-Acto knife. So that's your cutting situation. Okay. And it's so much fun. Just the cutting is such a fun creative opportunity. Okay, the next thing, we're getting down to it, is the glue situation. Okay, now it's so funny because here in Thailand we have this is our standard glue, this TOA. It's a latex adhesive, and it's pretty good. Works pretty good. It dries fairly matte, but if you're using like a shinier surface like a magazine, this will still look shiny compared to matte medium. And basically these are your choices. You're either going to use a glue, and there's different kinds of glue, but it's either a glue or matte medium. Now, matte medium is the professional standard, for making art. If you want it to last and be professional and, up your game, this is what you want to use. Having said that, you can use this also. Okay. Glue sticks are good, just a little bit, depends on what you're trying to do, but just to tack something down and then you do glue on top. I'm not going to talk too much about techniques. We'll get into that in the workshop, but you got your glue stick, you got your glue. And what I do is I usually find that it's a little thick coming out of this. So I have a little jar, and I just put some in and I dilute it a little bit with water. And so I have a slightly thinner mix. So if you have a little jar or a couple little vessels, like I also, I have another version of this in, it's an old stevia bottle. But any kind of container like this to make a thinner version. This actually, I misspoke. This is actually a little diluted version of the matte medium. And then this one is a little diluted version of the glue. So I use them both. And then I was experimenting with other glues that you can find here in Thailand. Chunbi, this one, oh my gosh, this one, Orca. I actually like this one. It's a little bit thinner already right out of the thing, but I spilled it in a cafe one time and I made a huge mess. But anyway, so then there's that. And then today, and I was like totally surprised, I found Elmer's glue here in Thailand. I didn't think I could find it in Thailand. And so that was my test I was showing you earlier. I did a test of all the glues. Here they are. And you know what? They're just not that different. They're really not. Like one's a little thinner coming out of the jar. but they all dried pretty matte on this matte paper. So don't worry about it too much, okay? You can always up your game later. Now, even in addition to the glue, matte medium comes in different brands, you know, so you don't have to get golden, which is the best. Okay, so in order to glue, I buy these cheapo brushes. Make sure they're pretty soft, but I get inexpensive brushes because glue is very hard on them, and you got to clean them really, really good, but they still end up sort of getting stiff over time. But here's where the cards come in too. I cut the cards and I'll glue with my paper. And then I don't even have to use my brush or clean my brush because I'll just throw this away. So I'll use this depending on the size of the piece that I'm gluing. And then I can turn it around and do another one, then I can toss it. So these cards can really come in handy for all kinds of things. Stuff I haven't even showed you yet. You will be amazed. So just get yourself a card stock or old business cards, or even index cards. I have index cards here, but they're a little bit softer. They're not quite as good as the business card stock, okay? What else? Hope you're not feeling overwhelmed. Most of this stuff is really cheap. Actually, you know, it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to take the workshop. And you're going to be so hooked. And plus, like, you're only going to have one thing of glue. I've got 6 here just to show you your options. So don't worry. Okay, so then the third thing is doing our layers. Remember I talked about that? So layers, there's all kinds of fun stuff. We're going to bring back. We bring back the paint. We can do more paint, not on top of the medium though. So if it's still raw, like this is a collage piece, this is still raw. I can change this with watercolor. Or we got whiteout, which is one of my favorite things. That hard white line is whiteout to make it hard edge. Sharpie, we can do you know, darker marks here if we want. Acrylic paint on top. I have some tricks. I use toothbrushes to make it soft, because trying to make the collage soft here and there, I think is really fun, because collage tends to be all hard edged, and I think that's very limiting. So we just basically bring back paint on top of this and do our third layer. So I think that's basically it. And then, you know, really you just need like little cheapo mixing things for your acrylic and cardboard. This is another thing. In addition to painting with my business card and scraping, I also love to use just a jaggedy rough cardboard. Can make a beautiful texture too. So we're going to work loose, but also create specific forms. So I think that's everything I need to tell you. So I'll put the link to the class, which I need to put on my website. Anyway, I'll put the link in the comments below, but contact me, Amy at artconspiracy.net or amydepiche@gmail.com. And if you have any questions, and I'd love to see you in the class, but either way, you should try collaging. Is like opens up all kinds of doors, artistic doors. Okay, see you next time. Bye.